Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Alright, let's see if you can, should be visible, but it's gonna get dark soon. But this is Aman, startup founder based in Japan. Currently I'm in New Delhi, visiting. And in this video I'm gonna talk about certain companies that I really admire, and I want my company to be somewhat like these companies. Yeah, so this is one of those kinds of fanboy type videos, I guess. All right, so let's jump right in. The first company is Sony. So I was I became a fan of Sony when I was like in college, I believe, because I read the autobiography of one of the co-founders of Sony, Mr. Akio Morita, who was also the CEO at Sony for a while. And he talked about he talked about a lot of fucking stuff, right? But the main thing that I took away about Sony was that, here's a fun fact, like they would invest 6% or something of their gross revenue, right? Gross revenue, not like net revenue or profit or whatever. Gross revenue into research and development every year, right? And the reason is that they wanted to be, so at that time Japan was known as bad products, right? Poor quality products, much like, not exactly like that, but kind of like today you see, oh, it's made in China, whatever. And in some countries, I guess that kind of has a bad reputation. I guess Japan was like that or worse, like where Japanese products were seen as inferior. And they wanted to build, they were really shocked by the atomic bomb, not just as Japanese people, but also as scientists. So they were like, whoa, America's so far ahead of us in technology, we got to do something. And so they built an R&D powerhouse, and their goal as a company, and this goes back to the personalities of the founders, which is that they wanted to be the kind of company that would always look to the future. And they always released, they were kind of like Apple, or Apple actually was inspired by Sony as well, and Steve Jobs was very inspired by Sony. He wanted to be just like Sony, in fact. Fun fact, right? And so Sony built really high quality products, and they priced them premium, right? Above the market, usually, just like Apple. And that was their thing. We will be a futuristic company. And a lot of, they were like IBM in the sense that at that time IBM was for the longest time the company with the largest number of patents in the world. And Sony was kind of like that in Japan, right? So there's Sony. And also I agree with a lot of his sayings on management. Akio Morita's thoughts. He was one of the few Japanese people who was very international in his outlook. He wasn't like foreigner shy or whatever. And that makes me respect the man as well. And the kind of camaraderie they created at the company, how they treated their workers, how they got loyalty from their workers, how they built a full stack company where everything from R&D to design to manufacturing was all done by the company, right? A lot of those things they really inspire me. So Sony is one such company. The next company is also Japanese, and that's kind of a recurring trend in this video. Okay, we're gonna get dark in a bit, but because a lot of Japanese companies have shown really good longevity. Many companies like whether it's Panasonic, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha, whatever. All these companies have shown that Honda, Toyota, they've all lived for decades, sometimes more than a century, and definitely far longer than the founder's life, right? Of course, they were dynastic companies in many ways, which mean, in the sense that the kid would take over from the father, but still, even with that, having a long-lasting company is something to be looked at, right? You can always learn from companies, because even if there's your kids willing to take up your company, doesn't mean the company will succeed, right? So I've been just studying these companies and what makes them live longer, right? But anyway, the next company on the list is Nintendo, and Nintendo is a really cool company. They were also kind of like Sony in the sense that they had a full stack thing. They would build the hardware, they would also make the games, they would design the IP, the original games, like everything from, just they would make the games, they would make the consoles for the games, and they would market, the products and everything. So they were again one of those really cool companies that could shape an entire industry on their own, right? Fun fact, Nintendo, and I talked about them in my book as well, they started in the late 1880s, I believe, I think 1887. And it was started by a guy who was making card games, right? Literally, he made card games for a living. And then eventually they kept, they didn't make their first electronic product until the 1970s. And, eventually only later, like I think 80s-ish, they started making video games as a serious category. So imagine that, like, damn, it's like what, 80 years, 90 years after the company's founding, you stay in business for that long. And then, by the way, they also made the G.I. Joe cards, and I don't know, I think they made a lot of different kinds of card games, even through World War II and World War I and everything. But they were alive for like 80 to 90 years before they even got into the business that we know them for today, right? So they changed the world in terms of video games almost like a century after the company was founded. How cool, how incredible is that? I wonder if, the founder, of course, was long dead by then. So imagine starting a company where long after you're dead, the company has its biggest, renaissance, right? And I kind of foresee, like, I want to build Densers into the kind of company where that happens too. When I'm long gone, I want the best years of Denslayers to come decades, centuries after I am gone, right? After the whole founding team and all our children and grandchildren are gone, I wish that Denslayers would become the kind of company that thrives on a much bigger scale at that time, and we just have to do the job of, starting the ship and blowing it into the right direction. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The snowball gets bigger and bigger over time, and that's somehow inspiring, Okay, so Nintendo is the second company. Then you have Apple and Nike and Disney. And the reason why I like these companies is that this video is becoming a little boring, so I'll skip what I like about Apple and all, because everybody knows these companies, right? They're like everybody talks about them. Instead, let me talk about different companies that people don't hear about often. So let's talk about the Edison company, right? So Thomas Edison, he started his, he built a factory, he built a lab in Menlo Park, which was the first company of its kind, right? Where they literally said, we are going to build a factory that produces invention after invention. And their timeline actually was reading Edison's journal this afternoon, and he mentioned that his timeline was that they would produce a minor invention every 10 days, and they would produce a major invention every 6 months. How incredible that is, right? Say what you want, he has a bad reputation these days because, for whatever practices he had, business practices, the guy was cutthroat and tough as nails, right? It is what it is. But the kind of culture where the company where he would just put together this moonshot factory of inventions and bring amazing people together and then give them the free rein to hey, let's go out and let's invent stuff, let's make new stuff, right? And he said he invents things so that they can make money and let him invent more things. So inventing things was his passion, and commercializing them. A lot of them did not get commercialized, right? But the ones that did paid for all the other inventions. So Edison's Menlo Park, is an inspiration for the kind of environment that I want to build at Densleys as well at my company. Another one of a similar nature is, you'll hear about Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, but Skunk Works was like a lab within Lockheed Martin, which is a major defense contractor. I don't like them, but whatever, it doesn't matter, right? And since the 1930s, they had this little wing where they would get really specialized requests for projects, right? Like, hey, we're building a new fighter aircraft and we're building a certain feature, whatever. So they would get this team of engineers and they would put them in a separate building that was walled off from the rest of the company, and they would just hack and smack and put stuff together at the Skunk Works. And even the logo, the mascot, was a skunk. Am I still recording? Okay, we're still recording. Yeah. And then, of course, there's Bell Labs by AT&T. Bell Labs is where, I think von Neumann worked. A lot of great, the whole modern, I don't know, what else, what all, the transistor, the semiconductor, I don't know what, so many things came out of Bell Labs, right? We owe the world the modern microprocessor age to Bell Labs for the most part. And I've heard 3M, an American company, they make post-it notes. 3M is another great company. Here's something really cool about 3M. So at 3M, they're still in business, right, after many, many decades. And here's the reason why. At 3M, there's a rule that a certain percentage of revenue each year has to come from products that were developed within the last year or two, something like that. So they're kind of forcing the company that you have to invent enough stuff and produce enough innovative stuff that every year you have to contribute to the revenue, right, from something which is new. And that's why I think over time, even though their best sellers are a few products, but even then, that company is really resilient to, disruption, because they keep innovating, they keep making new stuff. They're not just sitting on a fat fucking, cash cow and hoping that, we'll be good forever, right? That's how companies die in the end. For example, and don't take it the wrong way, but for example, let's look at Craigslist, for example, right? Craigslist has this one product, and it makes like $500 million a year. That's, it's a cash cow. Okay, maybe that number might be off, but I definitely heard numbers of $500 million or something somewhere. Maybe the company is worth that much or whatever, right? But I feel like I would never invest in a company like Craigslist because it would be disrupted sooner or later, right? So far it hasn't because of the network effects, it's trusted and everything. But I just don't like, it's a good business, don't get me wrong, but like, this feels weird that you put all your eggs in one basket, right? Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, all these companies, the reason they are still big and they're still growing is that they don't just depend on the Coca-Cola product, right? PepsiCo product. They have all these other branches. Coca-Cola still makes money from the syrup that they sell, that gets diluted, and you get the drink in the bottle, right? From all these bottling plants, which are franchises, by the way. Yeah, you have one cash cow, and then you have all these other businesses, right? But I prefer the kind of company where you have a rule where you have to produce and invent new stuff. You have to build new tools. You have to do new things for people, right? Yeah, forget about okay, so there's also something to be said, like Apple, for example. They are really, they often talk about focus. Like Apple will say no to a lot of projects. Like, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that. We will focus on, there's an article by Tim Cook which says that, look, all the Apple products on sale could fit on a single table. And that's true. You have all these Macs, you have the iPhones, you have a few accessories like the AirPods and shit. And yeah, you could technically fit all the products that Apple makes on a table. And that's cool. But, I guess that's one way to make a company, build a company. And I'm inspired by Apple in the sense that the key, I think, to many of these companies is that we admire is that what really enables a company to be resilient to isn't that beautiful, by the way? Right? It's a nice park, right? I'll walk like that. Yeah. The reason why a lot of these companies are able to survive for so long, I think I should make it is that they always make the best products for the most part, right? They keep thriving because they have this culture where, so Nintendo, for example, right? They started by their first big hit in the video gaming space was the Game Boy, right? So the Game Boy was launched in late 80s, and it was the dominant gaming console for like 11 years, right? 11 years it was number one across the world, right? Isn't that incredible for any company? And then they lost the number one position to PlayStation 2, right? And PlayStation 2, if you weren't there at that time, PlayStation 2 was a huge deal, right? And but here's the cool thing: after I just got caught off guard because some people were looking at me, which is kind of like, I don't care, but like it just it's a little weird, whatever. So PlayStation 2 took over, and then Nintendo came back and they launched the Nintendo DS, and they retook the number one spot, right? And then eventually they launched the Nintendo Switch. I don't know if you've seen, but a lot of people, it's like really popular in Japan, right? Even in America. And now I think Nintendo Switch is also number one or something like that in the world. And they're completely different products, right? Game Boy, Nintendo DS, Nintendo Switch. completely different type products, completely very innovative, and especially the Switch. Like the Switch is amazing, right? Whoever designed, I remember the first time I saw the Switch, I was like, whoa, that is a unique design, you know. But once you use it, it's like incredible. You know, you have the screen in the device itself, so it's a portable gaming device, and also you can just connect the same thing to a a TV or whatever, and you can play with your friends. It's just so insane, right? And the games are really fun. You know, there's multiplayer games, there's single player games, like just, and all this is like a century after the founder is no more, right? So yeah, always a lot of these companies offer the best products on the market, the best deal on the market at any given time, and I think that's what drives them. Like, the reason why any company would die was because the customers don't want to deal with them anymore, right? There's better alternatives in the market. That's what usually happens when the management gets lazy and nobody cares about the market anymore. They just want to milk the cow and squeeze every last drop, but they're not making new products, right? And what I've learned is that Denslayers, I want to build the kind of company where the core value at the company is to build shit that is the best in the market and the most useful and the best deal on the market. You always want to offer the best deal on the market, and I think for that reason I probably want to build a culture at Denslayers where in the executive team, like all the leaders of the company, the people who really decide where the company goes, have to be like product oriented, innovation oriented people who also have to deal with customers. It's kind of like 3M had the same thing, where at 3M, you know what? If you came up with a product as a scientist at 3M, right? It was your job to talk to the customer. Like the customers would come in if the customers came with a complaint, like, hey, this thing doesn't work, it was your job as a scientist to take that call, right? And say, okay, let me tweak the product, right? Because they were building these, adhesives and whatnot, right? So like chemical products and paper products and whatnot. So I kind of want to build that same culture where you find innovation type people. Dell had a very similar rule where they started out being a regular computer company, right? Engineering and then sales and whatever. Eventually they said, hey, we want the engineers to go and talk to the customers, and we want the engineers to help with the sales, right? And it needs to be an engineering driven organization. And a lot of their engineers actually quit. Not all of them, but quite a few of them actually quit because those engineers didn't want to be in front of the customers. But on the other hand, a lot of their engineers also thrived, like they really excelled, and they really felt like, there are always engineers who enjoy talking to people. So I think that's what propelled Dell into being a really big company eventually, right? And so anyway, I guess you can see how I'm like a nerd about these things. I really like studying companies and what they do well, what they do poorly. I like Disney and Marvel, for example, like because imagine making content, making movies that are super hit across many cultures. So, for example, they made this movie about Baymax, I think Big Hero 6. They made this movie called Coco, I believe, about the Mexican kid, right? Coco was a huge hit in China, right? Huge, like tremendous hit, right? The Marvel movie like Star Wars was a huge hit in Japan. It was inspired by Japan. I mean, Star Wars was Lucasfilms, but like even today, a lot of the Marvel movies and Disney movies are huge hits across the world, not just in America, where the movies are made. So I want to also build, like, same for Apple, you know, Nike shoes are huge in Japan, for example. And I believe that, you know, these companies, the reason why they succeed so much is because they build a brand that touches humans everywhere. You know, they talk to fundamental human things and human nature instead of trying to appeal to a certain trend or culture or a certain whatever. So anyway, I'll stop talking now because I'm kind of just, I hope I was able to capture my thought process about what kind of company I want to build Densage into. You know, it's going to be a place where people come from all kinds of backgrounds and they work on really ambitious projects. A cat, okay. And they challenge themselves and they are expected to produce new innovation, right? And not be attached to their first idea, to keep pushing out new things all the time, to keep innovating for okay, one last story. So WeChat, Tencent, right? At WeChat, which is like, you know, WeChat is like the super app of China, right? Everybody's on WeChat. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of people, right, use WeChat every day to run their entire life, like from paying to texting to it's like their Facebook news feed, it's their messaging app, it's their Venmo, like they pay money to each other, you know, everything is in WeChat, right? They have to order food, whatever, everything is on WeChat. It's their Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all in one, right? And at WeChat, they had a rule for the engineers where they said, you know, your only goal is to figure out how to build products that add value to people, that people who use WeChat. That's your only metric. Figure out how you can add more value to people's lives and go out and build stuff, right? I think that's pretty cool too, you know? So, yeah, dense layers, I guess you can get an understanding, like a kind of a glimpse into what kind of future I'm thinking for dense layers. Engineering, product driven, you know, realistic, always trying to be useful, trying to offer the best products, the best, you know, tools for customers or the trading partners on the market, you know, better than any alternative, and constantly pushing out innovation after innovation so that the company is resilient, and also building a culture where the innovative people make all the decisions, not all the decisions, of course, but make the core decisions. They control the company instead of the sales and marketing people, right? And building a globally resonant company where you're not trying to ride some little wave, but rather you touch people from across the planet, right? You can build one product and everybody on the planet uses that, right? Instead of making one new product for each country or something like that, right? So universal, product-oriented, innovative company, I think, is what I envision for dense layers. And yeah, now in the next video, I guess I'll talk more about how I'm making that happen instead of just taking a walk like this. So that's the video.